I used to think I was familiar with the feeling of being abandoned, but nothing could have prepared me for the moment my mother yelled through the phone, right as I was gasping in pain in the emergency room. "Don't you dare ask us to cancel our plans again, Martha. Broadway tickets in New York aren't easy to get." My hands trembled as I clutched the phone. The pain in my abdomen felt like someone was drilling a hot steel blade inside me, inch by inch. But the cold, booming voice of my mother through the video call hurt even more. It echoed off the pale white walls of the hospital room. Across the bed, my twin boys, Caleb and Dylan, were playing quietly with colorful plastic blocks. They were only 3. I was 35, a widow for 8 months. People talk about Christmas Eve as a time for miracles, reunions, and warmth. But for me, that night was about blood, tears, and suffocating despair. My name is Martha Sullivan, an interior designer living in Philadelphia. I used to think I was strong. I had survived sleepless nights, raising newborns, juggling 2 or 3 projects at a time to cover my husband's medical bills. The husband I lost suddenly to a stroke at 39. But now, lying on this cold hospital bed, the waves of pain crashing through me made me feel terrifyingly small. And the way my parents refused to help, it felt like the final cut in a wound that had been festering for years. "I just need you to watch Caleb and Dylan for a few hours. I have to go into emergency surgery. I have no one else," I said, my voice shaky as a nurse checked my blood pressure. My mother scoffed on screen. "The kids are too much to handle, and we already have plans with Aunt Marcia. You knew that. You should have planned better." And my father? He just sat there, on the other side of the video frame, flipping through the Sunday Times as if he hadn't heard a thing. When he finally looked up, he said one sentence, in a tone as casual as if discussing the weather. "You're such a burden, Martha. We're retired. We're done handling your problems." They'd retired 4 years ago after selling their old home in Chicago and moving into a small penthouse near the Jersey Shore. I had been sending them $2,000 a month to help with living expenses. I thought it was the right thing to do, especially after everything they'd done to raise me. But now, I see how naive I was. They didn't see it as kindness. They saw it as duty, a permanent obligation. My eyes stung. Not from pain, from betrayal. Head nurse Heather walked in, concern etched on her face. "Martha, the doctor says we need to take you to surgery in the next 45 minutes. The bleeding is getting worse." I nodded, my voice barely a whisper. "My children. I can't leave them alone." Heather hesitated, then gently placed a hand on my shoulder. "I have a friend. She's a nanny who specializes in working with children in difficult situations. If you're okay with it, I can call her now." I squeezed her hand lightly. "Please do. I don't have any other choice." After she left, I looked at my sons. Dylan giggled as Caleb dropped a block on the floor. My heart clenched. They had already lost their father. They couldn't lose me too. Not tonight. Not because their grandparents wanted to see a Broadway show. I ended the call. No goodbye. No tears. I had endured their indifference all my life. But for the first time, I realized, love doesn't always come with blood. A door had closed. I lay there, motionless amidst the sound of the heart monitor and the sharp scent of antiseptic, my mind spinning with pain and humiliation. The disappointment didn't just rise like a wave, it crushed my chest, as if the entire hospital room were collapsing around me. My parents were no longer people I could rely on. Maybe. They never were. I had thought that phone call would be my final cry for help, a chance for them to show some family bond, some compassion for their grandchildren. But no. What I received in return was concert tickets and the invisible slam of cold indifference. Heather returned not long after. She didn't say much, just placed her hand gently on mine and nodded. "Olivia is on her way. She said she'll be here in 30 minutes. I nodded and murmured a thank you. I didn't know why, but that one sentence made me break down. Not from weakness, but because, for the first time in 8 months, I felt like someone truly wanted to help me, not out of duty, but out of kindness. By then, Caleb and Dylan were lying still on the small hospital room couch, curled up next to each other asleep. Just 3 years old, they had already lost their father, and now stood on the edge of losing their mother too. I couldn't let that happen. I had to survive. For them. I struggled to sit up and reached for the phone on the table next to my bed. My fingers trembled as I opened the banking app. Every month on the 15th, I had transferred $2,000, 0 cents to my parents' account like clockwork. Never missed a date. That routine used to make me feel like a good daughter, a dutiful one. But now, it only made me feel foolish. I selected Cancel Recurring Transfer, pressed Confirm. There was no sound, no fireworks, but inside me, there was a break. Gentle, final. Right after, I opened my messaging app. I rewrote the message 3 times before finally hitting send. Starting this month, I will no longer provide financial support. My children deserve to grow up in an environment where they are not seen as burdens. Please do not contact me again. I set the phone down, like dropping a heavy stone from my chest. My back sank into the pillow, my eyes closed. The only sound remaining was the steady beep of the monitor beside me. Minutes later, the door opened. The woman who stepped in made me instinctively sit up, or try to, because of the powerful presence she carried. Olivia. She looked to be in her early 40s, her hair tied neatly up, tall and slender, eyes sharp but kind. But what struck me most was her smile. Calm, warm, as if she had stepped out of a place far more peaceful than the world I was in. "Hello, Martha," she said gently, without awkwardness. "I'm Olivia. Heather told me about your situation. I'll stay with you, if you allow it." I tried to nod. "I have no one else." "You don't have to explain," Olivia interrupted softly. She walked over to the 2 sleeping boys, watched them for a moment, then turned back to me. "They're safe. And I'll take care of them as if they were my own, until you're better." I didn't know when the tears started falling. Heather returned with the surgical consent form. I signed it, barely feeling my fingertips. But I knew this wasn't just a consent for surgery. It was a commitment to a new beginning. As the nurses wheeled my bed into the hallway, Olivia walked beside me, holding my hand. "I'll stay with the boys, don't worry," she said. The last glimpse I had of my children, Dylan rubbing his sleepy eyes, and Caleb whispering, "Where are you going, Mommy?" I turned my head back, forced to smile even as my chest tightened. "Just going to get my silly tummy fixed. I'll be back before you have time to miss me." Then the doors to the operating room closed. I don't remember how long I was out. I only know that the first time I woke up, soft light from the window filtered through the curtain and gently lit up the ceiling. The scent of antiseptic still lingered, but the sharp pain that once made me writhe had faded, replaced by a heavy feeling in my abdomen and a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. A familiar beeping echoed steadily beside my ear. My heart beat slow but stable. Next to me, an IV bag dripped silently, counting each second I was given to keep going. I tried to turn my head, a small movement that sent a jolt of pain through my body. The morning nurse, not Heather, walked over and smiled. "Good morning, Miss Sullivan. The surgery was successful. You're recovering well." I tried to speak, but my throat was dry and raw. She understood, offering me a sip of water through a straw. "My kids," I whispered, barely hearing my own voice. "They're safe and doing well. Olivia stayed all night. She even read them stories until they fell asleep." The nurse smiled kindly. "I've never seen a nanny so patient." My heart eased, even if my body still ached. Someone was looking after my children. I could rest. For now. After a few hours of sleep, I finally had the strength to hold my phone. The screen lit up with 16 missed calls from Mom, 10 from Dad, and 4 from my sister Rachel, along with dozens of unread texts. I didn't rush to open them. My chest still tightened every time I remembered my mother's shouting from the night before. I curled up slightly, closed my eyes again, until a soft knock came at the door. It was Olivia. She walked in with a small tray, holding orange juice, and a few pieces of pastry. "I brought you a little breakfast. The boys are still sleeping. Dylan's even snoring," she smiled. I smiled back. I'm so lucky to have you. She set the tray on the table beside my bed and sat down. I'm just doing what's right. But you, Martha, you're stronger than most people I've ever met. I looked up at her, saying nothing, but my eyes filled with tears. After Olivia left the room, I finally tapped the phone screen and began reading Rachel's messages. Martha, Mom said it was just a minor procedure. Why is everyone freaking out? What's going on, sis? I honestly don't understand. And from my mother. You can't do this to us. Do you know we've had to pull from our savings just to get by? We're family, Martha. How can you be so cold? Call us back now. We need to talk. This isn't how you treat your parents. One message from my father read, I hope you're just angry. There's no way you're really cutting off the $2,000 0 cents a month, right? I scrolled quietly through each line. Not a single message asked, are you okay? Or did the surgery go well? Just money, money, and more money. I turned off the screen. A bitter feeling climbed up my throat. Physical pain might pass, but this pain, this was old and far more persistent. Around noon, Rachel stopped by. She brought a container of hot soup and some pre-cut fruit. I saw your message. I honestly didn't know it was this serious, she said as she placed the food down, eyes filled with guilt. I nodded. I'm not mad at you. I just needed to stop. To save myself. Rachel went quiet for a moment, then cautiously asked, Do you plan to talk to Mom and Dad again? I didn't answer right away. I didn't know. I understand, she said, lowering her gaze. I just want you to know, I'm here if you need me. For the first time in years, I believed those words were true. 1 week after the surgery, I was discharged from the hospital. The doctor recommended I take at least 3 more weeks to rest before returning to work. I nodded, though deep down I thought, is rest even possible, with 2-3-year-olds growing like weeds? Thankfully, Olivia stayed. She not only cared for Caleb and Dylan, but also quietly cleaned, cooked, and sometimes brought me a warm cup of tea and said, You have to take care of yourself first, before you can care for anyone else. My small 2-bedroom apartment in the suburbs of Philadelphia had never felt as peaceful as it did now. Every morning, Olivia would take the boys to the nearby park for a walk, while I snuck in more sleep or laid still with a book, a simple pleasure I'd forgotten since James passed. I started eating better, sleeping deeper, and most importantly, I could breathe, truly breathe, for the first time in months. Though the incision in my abdomen still made me move slowly, my mind had started to function again. My thoughts were no longer shredded by my parents' pressure or inner guilt. I began to think about the things I could do, new directions to take. Not to prove anything, but simply to live true to myself. One Tuesday afternoon, while Olivia and Caleb were playing with puzzle blocks, I opened my laptop again. For the first time since James's funeral, I logged into my freelance interior design account. Over 40 unread emails awaited me. I started replying one by one, briefly explaining my health situation and proposing new deadlines for a few projects. The responses surprised me. Nearly all of them were understanding. Some even offered help or asked how I was doing. I felt seen, not as a money machine for my parents or a struggling single mom, but as a human. Someone with limits, with pain, and deserving of rest. 3 days later, Olivia and I sat on the small back patio, each holding a glass of iced coffee. Caleb and Dylan were below us in the yard, fighting over a plastic toy truck. I really don't know how I would have managed without you, I said, eyes still watching the boys. You would have managed. You always do, Olivia replied, but even strong people need somewhere to lean. Sometimes. I turned to look at her. Do you ever get tired of this job? She smiled. Of course. But when I see the kids slowly get their laughter back, I remember why I keep going. I understood that feeling. Maybe that's why I never truly gave up, even when I wanted to. That night, after the boys had fallen asleep, I opened my notebook and turned to the last page, the one where James had scribbled notes about expanding the business before he passed. My eyes stung. But instead of closing the book like every time before, I picked up my pen and wrote, "Rebirth, not from the beginning, but from the fragments that remain." I decided to start a memorial website design project, something I had quietly dreamed of after creating a personal site for James. So many people lose loved ones and don't know where to begin preserving memories. I could help them do that. The next day I spoke to Olivia. "I want to hire you part-time, not just for childcare, but as a partner." She smiled. "I think we're well on our way to becoming a new kind of family." I smiled too, for the first time in months, without forcing it. Another week passed. I rearranged the apartment, got rid of things I no longer needed, and created a new budget. One that no longer included sending $2,000, 0 cents, to my parents. Strangely, even with tighter finances, I felt lighter than ever. Rachel stopped by more often. She brought food, coloring books for the boys, and no longer asked about our parents. Instead, she talked about childhood memories and how she'd started to see things differently. I knew the healing journey was far from over, but I had started walking it, no longer dragged backward by the invisible chains of people who were supposed to love me. I didn't need to be a perfect daughter. I just needed to be a good enough mother. And for the first time in my life, I believed I could be. That afternoon, rain poured suddenly and the wind rattled the glass windows like a warning. I was sitting with Olivia, adjusting the budget, when the doorbell rang. Caleb and Dylan were napping in the room, and I wasn't expecting anyone. I stood up and walked to the door, glanced through the peephole, and my heart clenched. It was my parents. My mother wore a long gray raincoat, still clutching her familiar Michael Kors handbag. My father stood with arms crossed, wearing his usual stern expression, though this time there was a trace of unease. I hesitated for a few seconds, then opened the door just a crack, just enough for them to see me. "Martha, aren't you going to invite us in?" my mother asked, trying to sound calm. "No," I replied flatly, my hand still on the doorknob. My father cleared his throat. "We need to talk." I exhaled, the breath catching in my chest. "Talk about what?" "About how neither of you asked a single question about my surgery, but sent message after message asking for money?" My mother quickly jumped in. "Martha, don't say that, we're family." "Family who chose a concert over their own grandchildren?" I shot back, heat rising in my chest. "Family who only calls when they need money?" My father's face tensed. "Martha, we're in real trouble. The bank has issued a warning about the mortgage. If we don't come up with $75,000, 0 cents, in the next 60 days, we'll lose the house." I stood silently, the rain tapped steadily on the awning. My mother looked at me, her eyes unfocused. "We were wrong to refuse you when you needed help, but if we lose that house, we don't know where we'll go. There's no one else but you." "No," I whispered, more certain than ever. "You do have options. Sell Dad's sports car, cancel your spring cruise, sell that Rolex you love to show off." My father flushed. "You don't understand, those things are part of the life we've built." I nodded, eyes locked on his. "And me? What's my life? Raising 2 kids alone, losing my husband, recovering from surgery, and still being treated like your personal ATM?" My mother reached for my hand, but I pulled back. "I cut ties because I couldn't take it anymore. I choose my children, and I choose myself." "You're putting us in ruin," my father growled. "No," I said calmly. "You did that to yourselves, and now you have to own it." Inside, I heard Dylan stir and call out, "Mommy." I turned, looking once more at the 2 people who gave me life, now standing like strangers under a familiar porch. No guilt, no hesitation. "I need to go to my son," I said softly. "If you really want to change, start by admitting your mistakes, not begging for more." "We'll lose everything," my mother whispered, almost in tears. I didn't respond. I closed the door, not harshly, not angrily, just a simple firm motion, like wrapping up an old chapter, to begin a new one. That evening, Olivia made Dylan's favorite mushroom pasta. Caleb finished every bite and clapped, his face smeared with sauce. I looked at the two boys. Their clear, innocent eyes, unaware of what had just happened. And I knew I'd done the right thing. Olivia poured me a small glass of red wine. "Are you okay?" she asked. I nodded. If this had happened before, I would have cried, but now, I just feel lighter. You chose what was best for you. That's real strength. I leaned back on the sofa and smiled. Life wasn't easy, but at least I wasn't letting guilt chains bind me anymore. I was no longer the daughter who needed permission to feel. I was a mother, and I had just protected my children from the world and from the very people who once called themselves family. 3 days after that visit, an unexpected email from a distant relative named Paul showed up in my inbox with the subject line, "What's really going on, Martha?" I opened it, but before I could finish reading, my phone started buzzing with message after message from various relatives. Names I rarely saw on my screen. They all had the same tone: surprise, judgment, and suspicion. "Aunt and uncle said you refused to help when they were about to lose their house? They said you cut off all contact just because you were upset over something small? Are you okay? Why are you being so cold to your parents?" I knew exactly what was happening. My parents, after failing to get the financial support they wanted, had reverted to their usual tactic, retelling the story in a way that painted them as the victims and me as the heartless, ungrateful daughter, seeking revenge for past grievances. I wasn't surprised, just tired. I recalled all the times they'd done the same thing. When I couldn't come home for the holidays because of work, they told the family I was ashamed of my poor hometown. When I refused to lend them my car in college, they said I was selfish and self-absorbed. Now they were just recycling the same old script. But this time, I wasn't the naive girl who believed every word. I opened my laptop and wrote a short email, addressed to everyone who had messaged me. "Dear all, last week I underwent emergency surgery. During that time, my parents refused to watch their grandchildren so they could attend a play in New York. I've been financially supporting them for the past 3 years, every single month, even after my husband passed away. My decision to stop was not out of anger, but because I need to protect my mental health and my children. If anyone would like to hear more, I'm happy to speak directly. But if you prefer to hear only one side, I respect that and won't offer further explanations. Sincerely, Martha." I hit send, then closed my laptop. As if reading my thoughts, Olivia walked into the room with 2 mugs of hot cocoa. She set one down beside me and sat. "Rumors travel fast," I said quietly. "But truth lasts longer," Olivia replied with a calm smile. I looked at her, feeling the heaviness lift. There might still be more calls, more whispers, more judgment at family gatherings, but this time, I wasn't alone. And I wasn't the same person I used to be. I had learned that staying silent doesn't always mean surrender, and speaking up doesn't mean disrespect. I didn't owe anyone an apology, especially not when I had just begun learning how to love myself. The idea began as just a single note in James's notebook. He once wrote, "If anyone can help others preserve beautiful memories, it's you." At the time, I didn't give it much thought. But now, every word had taken root in me, growing quietly through each sleepless night. One afternoon, while Olivia was coloring with Dylan, I sat at my desk and opened my web design software, the same one I used to create a memorial site for James. I called it A Place to Remember. A space not only to store photos, but to share stories, memories, and even final video messages from loved ones. I didn't expect much. I just wanted to create a warm, safe space for myself and for others struggling through their darkest days. I shared the project in a support group for widows I had recently joined, introduced to it by Valerie, the nurse who helped me in the hospital. To my surprise, the response was overwhelming. One woman wanted to memorialize her mother through written stories. Another asked me to create a tribute site for her best friend, who had died of cancer. Each project arrived like a whisper from the past. Every story, a wound seeking healing. 1 month later, I officially registered the business as A Place to Remember. While my children were learning to recognize letters, I was learning to reclaim my life. Soon after, I hosted a small meetup at the local park, inviting single mothers, widows, and women quietly surviving their own grief. We laid out blankets on the grass, shared cookies and stories. No one preached, no one judged. There was only presence, honest and heartfelt. I realized that from my losses I had built something, not to fill the void, but to illuminate it. Martha Sullivan, who once only knew how to live for others, was now living for what she was meant to connect, to preserve, and to love. Martha's story is a reminder that sometimes, to live true to our values, we must let go of relationships we thought we could never walk away from. In real life, there are people who don't love us the way we need, and that's not our fault. Growth often begins the moment we dare to say no to pain and yes to ourselves. Martha didn't just survive, she was reborn. And any one of us can do the same, if we're brave enough. What do you think of Martha's journey? Have you ever faced something similar? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt and authentic stories about family life.